explore the eukaryotes a little bit, and then really talk about the kingdom formerly known as Protista or the Protist. They kind of have this funny name. We'll kind of get into it, but really let's just talk about what a eukaryotic cell is and how they came about first. Okay, so what I want you guys to do in your book on the first page of this chapter, chapter 20, is the endosymbiosis theory. Basically what it says is one bacteria engulfed another bacteria. The one that got engulfed and is now part of the larger bacteria either becomes a chloroplast or a mitochondria. Okay, so you kind of make sure you know that. Now, what also has developed is they have a flexible cell surface that can divide and move, and you can pull things in or you can shoot things out. So they have a much more flexible cell surface. They have a cytoskeleton. Cytoskeleton is basically like a huge network inside the cell, the space inside the cell that kind of can make this huge, crazy network. Okay, they have a nucleus to contain all their chromosomes, their genetic information. It protects their DNA. You want to protect that stuff. It's valuable stuff, right? So you want to protect it somehow. Eukaryotic cells a lot of them have digestive vacuoles. You want to keep the digestive enzymes from digesting your cells. So you want to kind of isolate those. Oh, I'm running out of space. They have membrane-bound organelles. There's one more after this, so sorry. Membrane-bound organelles like mitochondria, chloroplast, if you're a plant or photosynthetic organism. They have a Golgi. They have an ER, or an endoplasmic reticulum. All those kinds of things. And then the last thing, sorry for the space issues, is they have a special eukaryotic flagella. Not all cells have this, but if they do, and it's called a 9-2 formation. We'll learn about it when we do cell structure. Just know it's a special, better working flagella. Okay, and then now let's talk about how do you know something's a protist? Okay, so these things up here are true for all protists, fungus, plants, and animals. But what makes something a protist or a protista? Okay, really, here's the answer. It's not a fungus, plant, or animal. That's it. Okay? It's something else. It's some other weird thing. And there's all kinds of different groups. They're kind of like the junk drawer of biology. No longer does the true kingdom Protista exist anymore. They have a bunch of different kingdoms, and you'll hear some of these crazy names and stuff. But for now, we kind of still, for simplicity's sake, think of them as just a kingdom. Okay, so here's just some examples of some key groups and what they do and all that kind of stuff. The first is the dinoflagellates. You could probably maybe guess from their title is that they have 2 flagella. That's what makes them special. Okay, most are marine, meaning they live in the ocean. Okay, they live in salt water. That's what marine means, and are photosynthetic. They do photosynthesis. These ones are the causes of red tide. Red tide is where there's so many of these blooming that it literally causes the ocean to be red, like a brick red color. I've seen it before. You can see it off of our coast. It usually happens in the springtime around here where there's lots of nutrients available and this daylight gets longer, so there's a lot of sunlight available. These guys also can be bioluminescents, the dinoflagellates, so that's kind of a fun feature of them. The next group is the ciliates, and as you, again, probably can guess, they have cilia. Oh, genius. Okay. The other thing is these guys are actually the most complex group. If you've ever remember the name paramecium, these paramecium are ciliates. Okay, they're part of that group. And they actually have 2 types of nuclei. Kind of makes them a little different. So they have 2 types of nuclei, ironically named macronucleus and several smaller micronucleus. Okay. Next up, we have the diatoms. Diatoms, they actually make a shell out of silica dioxide. Actual reproduction that way, by just kind of splitting their petri dishes. These guys are, let me go back to their shell. When their shells all die, they sink down to the bottom of the ocean floor, and they actually can form what's called diatomaceous earth. If you have a pool and you put the white stuff in your pool filter, that's diatomaceous earth. It's just an example of, and they're used really regularly as an insecticide and for filters and things. So they're really important commercially. These guys are aquatic, so they could either be marine or freshwater when I say that. And a hugely important phytoplankton species. And we'll talk more about that on the next page. An important phytoplankton. Okay. The next group is the brown algae. Okay. These guys are large, like giant. In fact, one of them is called giant kelp. Okay, they can grow up to 6 feet a day if the conditions are right. So these are large, multicellular, photosynthetic organisms. So kelp forests off of our coast, if you've ever had kelp, that is a brown algae. That is a proteus. It's not a plant. Okay, these guys are mostly marine, but there are some freshwater examples. I'm going to actually draw a picture. I'm going to get a brown marker out because why not? Of their structure, because it's actually very similar to a plant. They kind of have plant analogous structures. So the bottom part of them, they actually have something called a holdfast. Okay. It's kind of like their root structure, although it doesn't absorb nutrients and water like a root system does in a plant. It just holds them to the rock or the substrate. Then they have a stem, okay, or actually what it's actually called is a stipe. Okay. Then they have a blade that comes out, okay, or it looks like a leaf. That's where photosynthesis can occur. Actually, photosynthesis can also occur in the stipe. And a lot of times along their blades, I'm going to draw another one here, they have a little tiny float right there. I'm just kind of made it like that. It's usually just an air pouch, okay? So that's called a float. There's a fancier name, it's nematocyst, but it's just a float. It's just air, okay? It helps them reach the sunlight. And not all of them have the float feature because some of them kind of live in shallower water. So it's kind of the basic structure of a brown algae. Okay? So protists, they can reproduce. They have to make more of themselves, right? So there's a few ways that they can do this. The first one is they can do asexual reproduction, or just no way. And there's all kinds of different ways. There's actually 4 different ways they can do it. One is binary fission, like we saw in the prokaryotes. One is sort of a kind of a retake on binary fission, if you will. It is multiple fission. Basically, instead of in binary fission, you make 2 cells. Multiple fission, you can make more than 2 cells, okay? So it's splitting 1 cell into multiple cells. Okay? Another one is budding. Okay, so they'll just have a little bud off. And then my favorite one, because it's just got a fun name, is sporulation. Sporulation, as you maybe can guess just from the spore sounding thing, is you form a new cell from a spore cell. Form a new cell from a spore. So those are kind of the asexual ways to reproduce. And then sexual, one of the things that we see a lot in the ciliates especially is something called conjugation, which sounds just like it is. 2 ciliates come together, and and they conjugate. They kind of latch onto each other, usually at what's called their oral groove, and they basically exchange some of their nuclei. Remember, the cilias are the ones with all the nuclei, so they'll exchange especially some of the micronuclei. So that gives them new genes, new genetic information, which is really what the biological definition of sex is exchanging and rearranging genes. Okay. A lot of protists, too, exhibit what's called alternation of generations. We're going to explore this way more in plants, so which is part of this unit, so for your tests and stuff. So we're just going to kind of write it out now, but I'm telling you, we're going to explore it more in plants, okay? It basically, here's how it goes. A multicellular diploid, so 2N, it has twice the amount of chromosomes, spore producing. Let me just go back to this diploid thing real quick. You are 2N. You have two times as many chromosomes. You got one set from mom and one set from dad. Okay, so you are a diploid organism. So a multicellular diploid spore-producing organisms give rise to a multicellular haploid, so only has half the amount of chromosomes, only one N, gamete producing organism. And then what's going to happen is then the two gametes fuse to produce the original, back at the top, multicellular diploid spore-producing organism. Oh, you can see it, okay? So we're just going to kind of circle it around to produce a new multicellular. So it's a big circle. And there's a picture of it in your book, and we will talk more about this when we do plants, because plants exhibit this, and you'll see it a lot. Okay. So you alternate between a diploid and then a haploid, and then a diploid and then a haploid. It's kind of the gist of it.